Got a very special episode coming your way today, guys. My friend Garrett Crone introduced me to our guest today, and I'm super, super grateful for that. So shout out to Garrett. He's amazing. Connected me with yet another amazing guest on the show. And today we're going to hear about the history of BYU women's basketball. She's a Hall of Famer from BYU women's basketball. And we're going to get to hear her story and her journey. And we're going to learn about the evolution of women's athletics, but specifically women's basketball from the time she was playing till the time now, right? Like to what it's become now. And we get to hear some amazing stories. But it's one of those interviews where I just sit back and I smile because I realized when we chatted on the phone prior to doing this interview that I know her son, Michael, who I've known forever, and he's been supportive of my show, my platform, and I didn't even know they were connected at all. As we were talking on the phone, I started realizing all these small world connections that we have, and it's just cool because it goes back to what I say all the time, and that is sports bring people together. It was through my passion of sports that brought me to Garrett Crone, and we were able to connect through our passion for sports. And it was through Garrett Crone that I then connected with Jackie, and it's through this sports podcast and just through local connections that I know her son and all the things, right? Sports bring people together, and it's an amazing thing. So I'm really stoked about it. I want to shout out everybody who's tuned in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow me on YouTube so we can continue to build that platform. And let's get into this interview. Get ready, because this is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. My name is Shane Larson, host of the show. Excited to be here with you guys for yet another interview here on the pod. Thankful for all the people who have tuned in over the last couple of years. I mean, we've been doing this thing since 2017, and we're not stopping now. In fact, we're just getting better and better and better, and we're bringing on more and more guests. And today, as you guys heard in the introduction, super special opportunity for us. Very small world that we're living in here. I found out all the connections with our guest when we were chatting on the phone just the other day, and kind of crazy world. But we're speaking to a BYU Hall of Famer here, someone who has quite the career, all the accolades and everything. We're going to be learning about her experience, and we'll be talking about a couple of different things, not only just her experience, but the evolution of women's sports and specifically women's basketball, get her insight into, what it's like today and what her opinion is of the athletes today in the women's game. And we're going to hear it all. And her name is Beene McBride. Jackie, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, you bet, Shane. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. So, Jackie, you it's not hard. If somebody just is looking at this right now, they can just go Google your name and they'll start seeing just lists of things as far as your accolades are concerned for the sports world. But I want to unbox this. Before you ever got to BYU to play college basketball, let's talk about women's sports and how you chose to get into athletics. Were you around it as a kid a lot? Did you have any siblings that you grew up with playing athletics and whatnot? Let's talk about your youth and when, you got into athletics as a female.
Yeah, I was pretty active kid. This tells you when my mom would get the report cards, I found some and it read there, I wish Jackie would be as interested in her studies as she is PE. And I laughed. I'm like, I love PE. We had PE. I could hardly wait for it. So when we were in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, I got the opportunity to play softball. My brother was playing hardball, and I wanted to play. That's what I wanted to play, baseball. And I basically taught him how to pitch. Don't ask me how I knew how to pitch. I just knew how to throw that ball in there hard, right? And they wouldn't let me play, and so I played softball and did quite well there. They had tetherball, and I was a tetherball champion. We were the champion in the softball, and last game against the All-Stars, I hit a grand slam. We got to keep the bat. So I was really into sports, anything active. Even in Michigan, in the winter, we would build an ice rink in the backyard and we'd play hockey at night even. take a light bright, take the screen off, stick it on the back of the snowbank, and play at night. We would do whatever. So I was very active. And, you know, when we moved to Utah, my dad was in the Air Force for 27 years. So I'm an Air Force brat. So we've moved all over. That tells you I was born in Okinawa and ended up in Idaho. Don't ask me how that happened, right? Beautiful Idaho. But yeah, we moved to Utah, and all of a sudden my avenues were open. They had track and basketball and volleyball for women. And I was like, and soccer. And I was like, really? I want to do that. So I started in, I want to say 8th grade was when I got to attempt to play basketball, which I'd never played, or volleyball, never played. And they just told me what to do, and I could just do it. And then, you know, of course, I had to fine tune my skills. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't great, but I was good. So, but that was basketball back then was, and volleyball and whatever you want to call it, any women's sports was pretty, you know, you didn't have a uniform. I called my sister the other night and I said, didn't you, and you, she was 2 years above me and she was in high school and I was in junior high. She said they had to wear those blue pennies. You zip up the front, it's a jumper. That was their uniform, and they'd put a penny over the top of the number on it. And the men had uniforms, they had all that. And when I got there 2 years later, they had uniforms, but they were wearing the same uniform for every sport.
Oh, wow.
Every sport, volleyball, track, didn't matter what you did. That's what you wore. And so it's come a long way. When I got there, even 2 years later, I had a uniform for volleyball, basketball, and track. So 2 years, that's in 2 years. But prior to leaving, we had no jerseys or anything for, you know, in the junior high. And so I took one of my teammates, said, you're coming with me. Let's go to Coach Clayton's office and let's ask me if they've got some old uniforms up in the attic of the boys that we can borrow. And sure enough, he goes, I do. He pulled them down. That was our first uniform. We wore a t-shirt under it. And that was North Davis Junior High's very first girls basketball uniform. So. Wow.
So like going from like, honestly, just not even having uniforms to where it's at right now is kind of crazy, but just the evolution of that's just gives a little perspective to those who are listening to this, and myself included, just where it's at, you know, where it was. I think sometimes we get lost in the hype of where it's at right now that we forget where it actually was. Yeah. And the importance of the evolution of that, of the women's game in any capacity, whatever sport it might be. Now, Jackie, for yourself, I know you and I were chatting, and you played multiple sports at a high level, like volleyball and basketball. I want to know, what was your decision? Or like, why did you make the decision to go with basketball? Were you better at basketball? Was that your love? Like, what was the reason to choose basketball in the collegiate level?
Well, first of all, I didn't even know I could get a scholarship, and I didn't know that I could even get my education paid for. My coach came to me with a stack full of letters and said, this says otherwise. They all want you to come play. And I'm like, what? I said, I can't afford college. She said, you don't have to pay. And I'm like, what? And that was my junior year and in high school. So for me, there was track, basketball, volleyball, tennis. I played all of them in high school and loved them both. Volleyball and basketball is where I got offered the scholarships. And then they said, well, if you could run track, because I was a track star. I was a track All-American in high school and a basketball All-American in high school. Actually, the first basketball All-American in Utah. So female. And so it was just kind of crazy. I didn't even know that till like last year, just so you know.
That's cool. I
didn't even know. I just was reading some of my articles. I go, oh, I guess I was the first. That's how I found out, by reading my scrapbook that I never read. So awesome. Anyway, I had a hard time choosing. I love volleyball. Oh my gosh, just love it with a passion. But then I went down for a visit to the university at BYU. I actually visited all the ones in Utah after I eliminated anybody out of state. And then I went down to have a visit at BYU, and there were the nationals, the volleyball nationals, women's volleyball nationals were going on at the time. So I got to go watch those like close up and personal, which was nice. And the basketball coach, that was the volleyball coach's first mistake, had the basketball coach take me around, me and my boyfriend, now my husband at the time now, around. And I just I was just impressed with him, and it was only going to be his second year when I coaching women. He'd always coached men, and they went 13-0 his very first year with the women. So I was very impressed with that, and I just like I knew I didn't want to do both because they overlapped so heavily, and I already struggled with school. So I'm like, I can't do that. That's just too much on my plate. So I said, I'm going to do basketball. So that kind of helped me make my choice, just really meeting the coach and really talking to him what his ideas were. And, and the odd part is, I thought I was going to play center because that's what I played. That's all I played.
Yeah.
And that was not the case. And I knew Tina Gunn, whose jersey's retired as well. Her and I are the only ones up there right now. There'll be more, I'm sure. But she's 6'5". She's an All-American, and she holds tons of records there. And she, I thought, how am I going to beat her? Okay, that was my goal. I'm going to beat her. I'm faster than her. I can beat her. I know she's taller than me. I wanted that spot. Well, the first day of practice, that we can get on the court after all the conditioning. You get on the court first day of practice. I want the guards down there. I want the forwards and centers down there. I'm like, where do you think I went? Where the centers and forwards.
The centers, yeah.
And my maiden name was Beene, Beene, so Beene. And I said, and he goes, and I go walking down to the forwards and centers. He goes, Beene, down there. And I went, and he goes, down there. So now I'm down with the guards. I'm like, what is he thinking? I'm really confused. So I'm competing with people who played guard their whole life.
Yeah.
I'm from California, Florida, all over the country. And now I'm competing and playing in a guard/forward position. So that was a little challenging. And to be honest, it was brilliant. So let's see you guard back then. Look at Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
She's 6 foot guard. I'm 6 foot. So it's hard for people to match up with me. I could post up. I could play forward. I could bring the ball down. We fast break. I'd be right in the middle of the fast break, running the fast break. So I could do all of that. And I was fast because I was a track star. And so here I am thinking, but why am I not playing center? But Coach Leishman was smart enough to put me in a place that I would excel the most. And I was doubting it at first, but I thought, what do I do? I got a scholarship. I got to do what he says.
Yeah.
So, and it was actually, I'm just glad I went with it. It was hard. Don't get me wrong. It was hard because you have to transition now, and you're playing against these girls half your size, and some close to your size. But it was interesting. Very interesting.
That's such an interesting point that you made, Jackie, because one time I interviewed a guy named Jerry Stackhouse on the show. He's an NBA legend, played for 18 years in the NBA. And when Stack was on the show, he said something similar that the general fans, like the casual fans, didn't know. But he goes, Shane, when I got into the NBA, he goes, I was a top pick. Like they knew me from the college days, but he goes, I played a 4. I was an undersized 4 all through college. And then in the NBA, that's not the case. They needed to put him at the 2 guard. Yep. And he said, I went from playing in the post, and he goes, it wasn't the offensive game that I struggled with. It was the defensive game, because now he was guarding smaller guys that were faster and coming off screens. There's just a whole different way of defending. And he said that's why he struggled so bad. And people were wondering, why can't Stackhouse transfer from the college game to the NBA game? And he was struggling his first year or two. And he said that was a thing that nobody realized, that I was playing a completely different position than I've ever played in my entire life. And what got me to the NBA is not what kept me in the NBA. I had to switch and adapt. And you talked about that. So when you mentioned that, it kind of reminds me of that. And I would like to, piggyback off of that and ask you, what was the biggest transition? You mentioned there was a transition there and you were trying to figure it out, but would you say it was like the defensive side of the floor? Was it the speed? What was the biggest transition trying to go from playing a center or a post to the guard position in college?
Just like you said, defending smaller people was hard because I got to get down low there. That was a little hard. But I would say, the speed wasn't an issue for me. I was pretty quick up and down the court. But just I wish that at that point my ball handling was a little better, because now I'm with the ball all the time. Not all the time, but you know what I mean. A lot of the time, and we had a point guard that would come in. If she came in, if she went out and a forward came in, I would just switch and I could just go wherever needed, right? But I would say, yeah, definitely defense, and then what did I say? I forgot. Sorry.
Ball handling was a
the
big
ball
one.
handling. So if anything, I would say, nowadays these kids, they're ball handling, doing all those exercises all the time. But when you're put in a center, your whole, career that you've ever even played, a whole whopping 4 years, and that was center, get her the ball. I had a great turnaround jump shot. I could, as fast, and then you're in college and it's a whole new ball game. And you're like, what? Okay, I'll do that. One of my friends said, you should write a book. I'm not a guard. I'm not I'm not a, or something like that. I'm like, it's just like, yeah, I'm not a guard. Well, yeah, you are. You're a guard forward now. You just got to, transition and get there. And I just really felt like so many of my teammates would say, Jackie, we look back on it and go, it was brilliant. And I'm like, yeah, I was extremely grateful. Not at the time, but yes, looking back, grateful.
For sure. No, that's super cool, Jackie. That's awesome. So looking at that, I know when we were talking on the phone, you mentioned something, and I would love for the athletes to hear this piece of it as well. You talked about conditioning and how, like, in high school, you think you're in shape. You think you're in shape, right? Because you're the star and stuff. But getting into the collegiate game, you realize pretty quickly that wasn't the case. Like, it's a whole different level. There's levels to the game. And I try to tell these people, Jackie, especially the kids that I coach, that even at the junior college level nowadays, it's 2024, like even at the junior college level, your conditioning that you'll be doing in the off season in the summer is disgusting. Like, it's like you will either love the game or hate it. And if you don't love the game, it's going to be very, very difficult to get through conditioning drills. So I would like to know, like, if you could expand upon that, like what the conditioning was like when you first got to college.
It was brutal, actually. We had these stairs behind it called the Richards Building, and you just walking them. There were 4 flights. I would literally get to the top and act like, because you got to breathe. It was higher altitude there, and you bend over. I just bend over and act like I was tying my shoes, and it looked like I was going because I seriously couldn't breathe. So we get there the first day, and the trainer goes, "Everybody over the stairs behind the Richards Building," and we all went over there, and we're like, "All right, you're going to run these stairs all the way to the top and jog down." And so we do that 4 flights. So okay, now you're going to hop and skip a stair all the way up. I mean, I'm just giving you a minute detail of that. And then just picture 1 foot, 2 foot, skipping 2 stairs, all these things. Okay. And then as soon as you're done, all right, go over there, jump rope for 10 minutes as fast as you can. Okay. All right. Now head to the gym, go do your weights, and then you do some drills on the floor. When you're done with those drills, it was about 2 hours worth. And as soon as you were done, you had to go run a mile after all of it. I know, it was awful. And so it's like, but the trick was you could get out of that mile if on Friday, you did a time mile in a certain time, then you didn't have to run a mile after your conditioning. Well, Tina, who I mentioned, whose jersey, mine and her, are hanging up in the rafters there at Marriott Center. Her and I are the two. The people whose jerseys are hanging in the rafter couldn't do it. We just couldn't do it. And I don't know, I was a sprinter. I wasn't an endurance person. And for weeks, I was just like, oh my gosh, if I have to run this, I mean, it just was brutal. Because you're like, oh, you're all done. You're so physically exhausted. Now everybody else is leaving. But me and Tina, we're running a mile. And so it got real frustrating. And then one day, Saturday, I think I told you this, but I was really sore. And I thought, I'm just going to go over to the gym. I'll go to the track, and I'm just going to gradually jog a little bit, stretch out, and get loosened up because I was so sore. I couldn't even get out of bed. I literally would roll out of bed, crawl to the doorknob, and pull myself up. And I swear my teeth hurt, my hair hurt. I hurt everywhere, just hurt. And so I'm like, I can do this. And so I just started to jog, and this man came in, and I believe he had something like cerebral palsy or something like that, and some type of handicap. And he walked in and he started jogging. And I went, oh my gosh, Jackie, you big whiner. And I like, okay, I'm going to jog, and I keep jogging until he's done. So I started jogging, and pretty soon I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's never going to stop. It was probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm not kidding. I was just like, I just kept jogging. I mean, it wasn't like, but I was like, oh my gosh. And he finally stopped, and And then I went over, and when I was done, I went stretched out. And that next Friday, guess who got their time mile? Woohoo! So I was able to get that time mile in, but he motivated me. He totally motivated me to just, guess what? Just suck it up and you can do this. And believe me, there were times that during conditioning, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Go home. I should just quit. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And they don't do a lot of those things anymore because they're really bad on the knees, they found out.
Go figure, right?
Right. And so, but it was just, I just kept, in my mind, I've always been this way. I'm like, nope, I'm not a quitter. Nope. And so I just kept pushing through. And that was my really first success story as a freshman at Brigham Young University. So, yeah.
Man, that's so wild. Yes. I mean, it speaks to there's a reason that your jersey's hanging from the rafters, right? Because like,
I was shocked. I really was. I was shocked. So
it's cool though. Like you were able to overcome adversity, and Jackie, it's cool because I always tell people that the athletes that are around here, like they're not just dumb jocks. Like these athletes, they learn these things, resilience, perseverance. You can get through hard times. You build a mindset that's almost essentially bulletproof over time as you have to go through that. You have to dig in deep into your soul multiple times, not just once or twice. It's like multiple times you want to quit, and you have to do that multiple days in a row. And, another aspect that I thought I'd touch base on, Jackie, is you talked about the student athlete piece of it. And you had mentioned to me something about like not always being so good at the school part, right? But you got to keep your grades up. You got to be able to do that. You got to be eligible to play. I too struggled with school. I was never good at school. And I was talking to a player last night about this because, I was saying, sometimes you just got to play the game, man. Like school's not always going to be your favorite thing. And maybe it won't be applicable to what you want to do in life. Like school you might not be taking classes and maybe you will, maybe you won't, but sometimes you just got to play the game because currently that's how the system works. You got to be able to play. You got to be able to get the grades to play. And school's not always easy for everyone. And so I resonated with that when you were talking about just school, but would you mind maybe sharing some insight to that? Like how you were able to still, even if school wasn't your favorite thing and it wasn't the easiest thing, how you were able to keep your grades still so that you could play the game that you loved.
Yeah, I absolutely. That was, like I said, my daughter who went on a scholarship to Weber State for high jump. She was only there a year, and she asked me, how did you do it, Mom? How were you a student athlete? And I said, it was difficult. And so I talked to her about the school. And for me, I had a reading comprehension problem. Like you could give me a whole page, I'd read it and go, those are a bunch of words to me. And some things was weird. I could read and other things I couldn't. I didn't quite understand that. And then, so I thought, well, I'll just go to class. So I went to class, and most of the time I would take my own notes. But if I had somebody I knew said, can you take notes? And I will get those from you. So I could focus on the teacher. If I could hear it and see it, that's how I learned. It was very visual. Then I could learn it. And so I had to go to class. If I didn't go to class, it was really difficult for me. And then I also had a problem with writing papers. I couldn't get it from the brain to the pen to the paper. And apparently that's a lot of kids have that problem. And so I had a friend who he actually owns a private school in Florida, and she called me up one day and goes, Jackie, I know all these kids have the same thing you did, and you just kind of grow out of it, but there's ways you could have fixed that. She would write, I would really say, this is my paper I want to write. And this is how I want to start out. This is how I want my midsection. This is my summary. And she would just do a kind of bullet points for me, and then I could go write it. It was really weird. And I didn't know why. I mean, sometimes I thought, gosh, am I stupid? And then, no, I had a learning disability. And I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are other people. But it's hard when your roommate's a pre-med, okay? Yeah. And so your roommate's a pre-med, and you're like, oh, my gosh, I'm not her, And so I did go to seek some of the teachers' help to say, look, I'm not understanding this. Can you explain this to me? And once I did that, I was like, oh, it would click, and then I could do it. But it just needed extra little time. But it was very, very difficult for me to, the school part was hard. Well, don't get me wrong. The physical part was hard too, because by the time you're done with your practice, you go to school from 8 to maybe noon. And then you're at 1 o'clock, you've got to be taped, stretched out, everything by 1, and you're done by 3. And then you got to go do your extra stuff after 3. And then you go home and study. So it was a full-time job. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, understanding that I think is probably important for those who are getting into it. Like, understand the expectations, it's a full-time job. I love that you said that, because from the morning till the evening, I mean, there's something, and you've got to be able to prioritize your time, but it can be done. And I think that's what we can learn from your
Oh,
story and
yeah.
your example, is it can be done. You
Mhm.
might have to get unique and find ways to make it happen, but it can be done. And I think that's so cool, because you found you were I would call it resourceful, in the sense of just figuring out how you learned, and you knew how you learned better. So you just made sure that you were at the class. You made sure you did it the right way that would help you, and you got the job done so that you could play the game. I
Well,
think that's awesome.
nowadays they've got tutors. So they have a whole room, a computer room. They can go in, they can get extra help, which, oh my gosh, that would have been fantastic. But
Oh
that just wasn't my time. It is now, though. They've really helped the athletes be able to become really good students, and that's what's most important. My basketball scholarship was to help me get an education, so that was great. I was able to get my bachelor's degree, and so it was an ends to me, really. That's what basketball was for. Basketball was for helping me get a good education. So that I loved that part of it.
Heck yeah. Well, Jack, let's talk about one of your, I mean, you played for the time you were at BYU, you're a Hall of Famer for a reason. And I want to know, like, one of your favorite memories, whether it was a game, a practice, a bus ride, whatever it might have been. What's one of your favorite memories from playing at BYU?
I have so many. But I have one that's kind of funny. I think you'll enjoy. We were on a road trip to, Lubbock, Texas. It was just outside of Amarillo, and there's nothing there. Okay. And there was a bunch of teams coming there that were ranked in the nation that we were going for this tournament. And so we headed there, we got to the airport, and we waited for our bags, and they didn't show up.
Oh, shit.
And so we're like, okay. So there's, well, just go to your hotel. We have a bus waiting for you to take you to your hotel. And we're like, okay, we'll get on, and they'll bring them to our hotel. So we get on the bus, and I'm telling you, this guy, it's like a school bus. Okay, that's not normally how you pick a school, but we're like, okay, we're all getting on the school bus, and this guy had been drinking. So the guy that's driving is probably drunk, and he takes us to this hotel. Coach goes in to check us in, and guess what? No reservations.
Of course not.
No, and they booked those year in advance. Okay, so we had to go find a place to stay, and of course we'll call this the Roach Pit Motel. We had to go to the store and get toothbrushes. We had to sleep in our clothes that we had just flown in. We had a game the next day, and the next morning we all met at breakfast, and still no uniform, no nothing. Okay, so we're like, how are we going to do this? So they met up with the university athletic department there. I'm trying to think of the name of the team. It was Texas. Oh my gosh, I wish I could remember the name of the team, but they were ranked in the nation. And so was Kansas was coming too. And that was, I don't know if you ever heard of Lynette Woodard, who won the Wade Trophy, and also congratulated Caitlin Clark when she broke one of her records. She was there. Good player. So anyway, so long story short, the athletic director says, we've got some shoes in here in this locker room, and we've got some socks here, and here's some old uniforms. So you have to imagine, okay, it was Wayland Baptist. That's what it was. Wayland Baptist were ranked, okay? So we're Brigham Young University, okay? The Mormons, whatever you want to so,
Yeah.
So we go walking out in Wayland Baptist uniforms, okay? The Mormons in the Wayland Baptist uniforms to play our first tournament game. And everybody goes, did you win? I go, I have no idea. Because all I can remember, it's, I don't know. To me, it was just gross. You're wearing someone else's shoes and socks. You feel like you're wearing someone else's underwear, a little bit. You're like, okay, and you're out there trying to play. I don't even remember much of the game. All I remember was they kept saying, remember, this is not Wayland Baptist. This is Brigham Young University. And so that trip was probably very memorable. I don't even remember if we won, because all I can remember is that. Bunch of Mormons wearing Wayland Baptist uniforms.
That is hilarious. See, that's the stuff those are the memories that you'll never forget, right? Like that is hilarious. Like how does that even happen, right? Like you think back on it, you're like, how did that happen? That is so awesome. Oh,
we don't know. It just was one thing after another. So Yeah,
When it
it
rains,
was.
it pours. And when it rains, it truly pours. You know, Jackie, I want some insight for the athletes that are aspiring to, play at the next level, whether they be, female, male, whomever, failure. Failure, I'm sure you had to experience to, you're a Hall of Famer, so there's a lot of successes, but along the way, I'm sure there was some failures. Can you maybe tell us a time that you might have come up short and how you were able to respond to that?
Actually, yeah, there was a turning point for me my freshman year. I had not started maybe a couple of games until I proved myself, and I was starting every game. And then we had to play in the Smith Fieldhouse, which is not the Merritt Center, because Merritt Center had some event going on. And we played this game and went out there and played, and I was awful. I was like, I'm talking 0 for 10 from the field and 0 from 11 from the line. I couldn't hit steel. Had 11 rebounds, probably chasing my own shots, right? And it was awful. And I knew I was done. I was just done. I felt like a failure. I mean, it was just, I don't think I've ever had a bad game like that, ever. And I remember going back to my apartment, and the coach's wife had dropped by, and, how you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm doing all right. I'm not so good though. I don't know. Coach will never play me again, And he goes, oh, don't be silly. And I seriously knew that I'm on the bench, and before every game he'd say who was starting. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm like, I'm benched. I knew it. And he just goes, Beene. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, get out there. And I go, no. And he goes, is your name Beene? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, get out there. So he had confidence in me that I didn't have myself. And so he knew it was just one game. So sometimes I think we beat ourselves up over one game. It's just one game. And you move on. And I think the thing with this too is I think the one thing, the best compliment my coach ever gave me was, and I read it in a newspaper article too recently, that he had said something. He said, Jackie was teachable and she was coachable. And now, I was like, wow, I was? I'm like, I guess I was. Maybe I wish I would have been a little more coachable in high school, because my coach kept trying to get me to use the bank shot and I would never use it. And then I get to college and that's all my coach told me to do. Much higher percentage shot. And that was my shot. That became my shot. A 15, 20-foot jumper from each side. I could do it on a dead run. And so, no, but I think being coachable, being teachable, and really see what the coach is trying to help you, or who's trying to help you, and how that can apply, and try and apply it and do it. Try it. And if it's not working, go back to the coach. The coach isn't working. What am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? Because you're telling me this. Oh, no, you're doing it right. And my coach would say, I used to say, practice makes perfect. And he goes, oh, no. The right kind of practice makes perfect. So if you're practicing it wrong, you're never going to get perfect. You're going to be perfect at doing it wrong. So, so that's, we used to always say that. But no, I think really just being coachable, teachable, and those things that I just told you. So
that's super helpful. And what I'll encourage, I should have said this earlier, for those who are listening, any golden nuggets you have, I always have my phone on me, if that's how I listen to podcasts. So I'm like, if you're listening to this on your phone, pull out your notepad that's on your phone, type some golden nuggets in, rewind it. That's the beauty of a podcast. You can rewind it and listen to what Jackie just said. If you missed something out there, like what did she do to be able to overcome that? Take those notes, apply those things, and watch how things get better. That's the whole point of doing this podcast, Jackie, is I love to hear from people like yourself, these people who've been successful in what they're doing in their sport. And, we always think we have it, we know it all. Why don't we learn from the people who have done it, who have been there, who've been in the weeds, and you do that. So the last question I'll ask in regards to your career, Jackie, is the transition out of sport. And that tends to be a pretty tough situation for some athletes, because their identity gets wrapped up sometimes in the sport in which they're competing, especially if they're doing it their whole lives and they're doing it at a high level. And I would love to just hear kind of some insight you might have when you're transitioning out of sport into the next phase of your life, and how you were able to go about that.
Well, I had an opportunity right after I was done. They were going to do a pro league right after I was finished. It was going to be in the summer, and they were going to experiment with that. And I was like, oh, perfect. This is right at my alley. I can do it in the summer, and I could go finish the rest of my school in the fall. And I worked out with a tight end that played at football at BYU, and we worked out every day. And I mean, I was like probably in better shape than it was, I swear, than when I was playing. And so I'm like, I was super excited about it. And they changed it to the fall. And I was going back to school, so I couldn't do it. So I was like, oh. And then I had an opportunity also to go try out for the Olympics. And I know this sounds really weird, but at this point in my life, I wanted to start a family. I wanted to be a mom, and I was been playing so many sports and every sport I could think of. And this is where I tell people this, I was afraid I'd make the team. And then I knew my life would go in a totally different direction, and I just wasn't prepared to do that. I wanted to have a family. So therefore I did not even go to the tryouts. I just said, no, thank you very much. I appreciate it, but I'm moving on. And that wasn't a big transition for me from sports there. It wasn't until after a knee surgery and different things that I thought, I can't do those anymore. And so my philosophy becomes, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And it's hard because when you're like, I'm Jackie Beene McBride. I'm a Hall of Famer. I can do all these things. And your body goes, ha, let me tell you, nope, you can't. And so you can, but you're going to pay for it. And so that's kind of my motto right now. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's like when I went to my daughter's track meet one day, they had these hurdles up there, and I looked at my husband, I go, I could run all those hurdles. And he looked at me and I said, okay, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I probably would have broke my neck.
Hey,
but I didn't. But no, I didn't think it was that hard of a transition for me, just because I put everything into it. I gave it my all. And so, I did do some coaching. I coached 1 year with Coach Leishman there at BYU. Then I coached with my sister at Timpview High. We took this team who hadn't even gone to region or anything to the state championship. We lost by 1 point.
Oh.
And I taught them every single play that BYU did, because we had the perfect team for it. You had to have the right team and the right for it, or it wouldn't have worked. And it just was an incredible experience to be able to watch that with high school girls and to see them go from this one level to, well, we've never even won districts. Well, you just won. Now we're going to state, and we lost by 1 point. But it still was a success to me. Super success to watch those girls just improve every day. It was great.
Absolutely. Jackie, this is amazing, and I lied. I have one last question for you, because we got to wrap it up with this. Looking back on your career and everything that you went through, just all the goods, the ups, the downs, everything, and the successes that you've had, what would you say is the biggest life lesson that sports have taught you?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. Teamwork, competition, good competition. I mean, just pushing through things and being able to overcome challenges. There's just in almost all of my aspects of my life. So, even little things like one thing I learned from my teammate Tina. One day she put her arm around me and said, Jackie, can I tell you something? I'm like, yeah. She says, when someone comes up and says, Jackie, you played an amazing game, don't go, oh yeah, oh, I did this and that. Say, thank you. And I was like, that was probably some of the best advice I ever. I'm like, oh yeah, because you always making excuses like, yeah, but I did this and that. She goes, Jackie, they just want to compliment you. Just say thank you. And that was a hard one to learn, to be honest, because I didn't take compliments very well. And so that was one. And then I was going to tell you, I was going to revert back to something. I don't know if you remember this. When I played ball, one of the things to overcome, which is interesting, I wish we'd had the small basketball, and I wish we had the 3-point line. Because the coach's son was our ball boy, and he actually, when he was a dentist who grew up, he spoke at my Hall of Fame. Okay. And he told everybody, he said, if there'd have been a 3-point line, Jackie would have scooted in. And I was like, oh my gosh, Rick, that was so nice of you to say that. I would have scooted in. I didn't know, there was no 3-point line. And the first time I ever shot one of the ball that the girls use now was in Australia. We played there for a month. We played 19 games in 22 days, and we won 17 of those games.
Whoa.
And when we played there, my very first shot was an air ball, because it was just lighter. It was just, I was like, but you could adjust quickly to it. So that's the thing I liked about it. And then you had to go back home, and now we're playing back with the men's basketball. And so, yeah, it just was interesting, the changes, and I love the changes. I wish I'd had that, but I didn't. So there's a lot of advantages for women to have that, and the smaller basketball and the 3-point line. Look at Caitlin Clark. My word. She's doing amazing things for the sport. And the thing I love about it is that she's humble about it. It couldn't happen to a better person. I don't even know her, but that's who I envision, with someone like her to bring such a good attention to the women's sports. It's fun to watch. When people will come watch us play, we play right before the men's games. People would come in early, and get their seat, and it would get full. I mean, that Marriott Center holds 23,000 people. And so they'd start coming in and watch us play, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are really good." I'm like, "Well, you need to come to the game and see," And so, women's sports has come a long, long way, but it's still some ways to go.
Yeah, but it's cool to hear, like, from the fact that you guys didn't even have the 3-point line. You were playing with the men's size basketball. How many points do you think you would have had, Jackie? Seriously, like, if they had a 3-point line?
I don't know. I don't know. Matter of fact, I have to tell you, a reporter came up to me and goes, "So Jackie, how you feeling about getting ready? You're going to be maybe in the next game, you'll score your 2,000th point." And I go, "I am." I had no idea. I never kept track of that stuff. So I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know. Is that a big deal?" And they go, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh." I honestly just played because I had fun. I worked hard and I loved it. And I wanted to be successful, and I wanted the team to be successful. And when you're helping each other, you're going to be successful. And so it was just good teamwork. We had really good teammates. And then for them to say that to me, I'm like, how are you going to feel? I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to feel. I didn't even know I was approaching 2,000 points. So when I did, it was a wonderful thing. My teammates huddled around me, gave me a big old hug. I got to keep the ball, which I never did find the ball. I don't even know where it is. But it was neat to share that with my teammates. I didn't know. Like I said, I didn't even know. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I got 2,000 points." And then you just keep playing the rest of your year. And I don't remember what I ended up with, but it just, I don't know, if you're keeping track of all those things, I just think I think you're looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love that you played the game because you love the game. It's super cool. And it's funny. I have an immense amount of respect for for the BYU women's program right now. I had Coach Whiting on my show, and her daughter Amari, who's playing over there now. She's just finished up her freshman year because they're here locally in Idaho. Or they were here locally in Idaho until she got the job over there. So I've been kind of following them closely. I'm going to be following them even more closely now after having spoken with you. And so I'm excited to cheer their program on even more now that I have a little bit more of the history. So I want to say thank you, Jackie. Thanks for joining the show. Thanks for being willing to take some time out of your busy schedule and share your insight with us. And I'm looking forward for everybody to get to hear this. This is exciting for me.
Shane.
So thank you.
You're great, Shane. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. For those who are listening, make sure to hit the subscribe button because we'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.